discuss these for a couple minutes here. First of all y'all had different court decisions or court cases. Is there anything, all right, did you learn something about how the Supreme Court does and what they look at? What'd you learn about the Supreme Court?
They throw away what the world, like what the country's about, like their mindset, possibly, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like
the guilty person still has rights.
Do they worry about the actual case?
No, they just,
Whether or not it's constitution.
All they looked at is they didn't bother with, did this person do this or not? They looked at, was the case done right? And if they overturned the decision, they didn't go free. That just meant they're going to and I heard y'all mention this, they're going to have a retrial or redo it, doing it the right way or doing it a better way. Did y'all all get that from this? Okay. Let's start with Miranda. And y'all heard of this before. Who had Miranda? Y'all had Miranda? What was going on? What was this all about?
It was about a kidnapping and sexual assault that occurred in Phoenix.
Okay.
And the whole thing was, it was a Mexican national arrested in his home and taken to the police station.
Let me stop for a second. A Mexican national. What does that mean?
He lives in Mexico.
From Mexico. So what could we assume about this person? Could we assume something about him?
Yes.
What about the language? Could language be a problem? Okay, so just remember that part. So they arrested him and then what?
Took him to the police station and he was identified by the victim. And when he found out he had been charged, he asked for an attorney but was denied. And 2 hours later, investigators returned with a confession signed by Miranda and said he knew his rights. And then 2 weeks later, he was denied counsel.
All right. He asked for a lawyer, wasn't given a lawyer. He signed a confession. Is there some question as to whether or not some things have been done right here? Yeah. Was he later a lawyer given to him? Is like 73.
Yeah, he's like
Hadn't practiced law in 50 something. So they gave him some guy they had to wheel up and prop him up and have him talk. So what was the issue here? It wasn't whether he did it or not. What was the issue?
And not knowing his rights.
Was his constitution, was his due process rights given? And what was their decision?
At first he didn't know, but then when the Supreme Court came in, they voted to overturn his conviction.
What was the vote?
6-3.
6-3. All right, 6-3. And this is what started the Miranda rights. Was he later convicted? Did it say?
At first he was convicted, but then they overturned it.
Okay, but then did it talk about the later?
No, it didn't say.
It didn't say? Okay. All right. I want to say I saw something, I thought he might have been later convicted for it. So, see that they didn't worry about whether he did it or not. They worried about if he was given his due process rights were being followed. And to this day, that's why if you get arrested, they read you your rights. Who had Roe versus Wade? Okay. Have y'all ever heard of Roe versus Wade before? Once they start talking about it, you'll go, oh yeah, this is the abortion case. And the Wade of Roe versus Wade was Henry Wade. He was the Dallas district attorney. So this case took place in Texas. So what's happening here? The loudest people in class.
Yeah. So Roe wanted an abortion, but it was against the law in Texas at the time, and she challenged that, and I think she ended up winning.
Yes. Well, when it got to the Supreme Court granted that. I don't know if y'all. They have to use the Constitution, right? They use the 1st, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 9th, and the 14th to describe a right to privacy. And that's what they use, the right to privacy to have this abortion. And they had to ask this question: did the states have a compelling and overriding interest in regulating the health, safety, and morals of the community? Was there an area of personal, marital, familial, and sexual privacy protected by the Bill of Rights? And was this Texas law an invasion of that? Or were women permitted to terminate pregnancies at will? Or were fetuses people with rights to be protected by the state? So that's what they had to look at. What was the outcome of it?
The court ended up agreeing with her and letting her.
What was, do you know what the vote was?
7 to 2.
7 to 2. They agreed and said, yes, there is a right to an abortion. They upheld, the Supreme Court upheld the right to terminate up to the first trimester, which is 3 months. Each state is allowed to determine, a state cannot say abortion's illegal, but a state can determine when an abortion is legal. And most states say the first trimester. Some states go a little longer than that. If I'm talking with you, y'all know how I am. Y'all know the guy you're talking to. I can understand. Okay. First try. I know it's legal, but I don't understand after the first trimester. I mean, did you have to wait 3 months? You know what I'm saying? There are some states that allow it after 3 months, but anywho, I want to read this little part about the decision, about the opinion. Justice Blackmun, in the majority opinion, he said, for all these three, in the 14th Amendment, there's 3 references to person. And he said, none of these applies postnatally. What's natal mean? The natal unit, or what's that one? Baby. So postnatally would be after or before they were born. Or he said this only has application postnatally. So what he's saying is the Constitution does not protect unborn. But later, he said, on the other hand, the state does have an important and legitimate interest in protecting the potentiality of human life. What would that be? What would the potentiality of human life be? Before. So even in their decision where they said abortion's okay, they went both sides. They said, yes, the state Constitution doesn't protect unborn babies, but he said the state does have an obligation to protect unborn children. Now let me tell you about Roe. Roe was Jane Roe. That was not her real name. Her real name was Norma McCorvey. She had a child and she was pregnant, and her husband left her. She was a single mom, and that was, in the 60s, it was tougher. I mean, there was a lot less opportunities for women, and women weren't really down with. It was a different time. She did not have an abortion. She wanted to have an abortion. I always tell you, the person that tries to do it the first time takes the punch in the face, so that everybody else coming after her doesn't take the punch in the face. Does that kind of make sense? As I grew up, I'd never seen Norma McCorvey. I had seen the news where they had like pro-abortion rallies and pro-life rallies, and they mentioned Roe versus Wade, but wouldn't you think she would be like a speaker or like a well-known figure and sing? She wasn't, because in the 80s, she became a born-again Christian and spent her life fighting abortion. So they never brought this lady up, who was like the ringleader, not the ringleader, I hate to say it like that, but anyway. But yeah, they started in Texas. Anytime you hear there's every year or so, there's something before the Supreme Court about abortion, and they'll mention Roe versus Wade. They ever say Roe, that's what they're talking about. All right, who had? I'm gonna say Powell, because that's interesting, to say the least. Brown versus Board of Education. All right, what was the circumstances? What was going on?
An 8-year-old black girl was denied permission to attend a white school 5 blocks from her house, and they made her go attend a all black school. It was like 22 blocks away.
Yeah. So what was the question here? Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other, quote, tangible factors? What's tangible mean? You can see it, it's physical. All right, this building is a tangible object. You can look at this building, and if it's fallen down, you can say some things about it. Or if it's brand new, you can say some things about it. The segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of equal educational opportunities. In short, the court was asked to determine whether segregation of schools was at all constitutional. And what did they come out with? It was unanimous. Now, we mentioned this last week. Does it amaze you that in 1954, the all-white Supreme Court would unanimously flip their precedent? To me, that's one of the most amazing things in our history, because there was no pressure, there was no civil rights movement. I told you last week, Martin Luther King was in college still. Rosa Parks hadn't sat down yet. Nothing had happened yet, and they came out and said no. That they flipped the precedent, because Plessy said, "Yeah, you can do that." Was there a quote in that? Did you get the quote about? I heard y'all reading it. Justice Warren. And believe it or not, you've heard of Justice Warren before. Did y'all talk at all about JFK assassination? You heard of the Warren Report? The Warren Report is what investigated the JFK assassination. Warren, Chief Justice Warren, headed that up. So his name was Warren. Yeah, Barton. No, it wasn't Murder. Anyway, Earl Warren, I think. To separate some children from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way likely to ever be undone. That's pretty amazing. I mean, to me, to be able to say that statement, to me, that proves why it's people on the Supreme Court it's good they're free from political stuff. You know what I'm saying? They were able to. I think a lot of people in the 30s, 40s, and 50s felt this way, but didn't want to say it because they didn't want to die. They didn't want to get beat up. They didn't want to lose their job. You know what I mean? And these people were free from all that and were able to say it. 9-0. They did it. Now the next day, it really took till the 80s for this to happen. In a lot of places, it took that. Boston's one of those racist places in the world. The North is not racist. The North just acts like they're not, but they are. Anyway, anything else y'all got from it? All right, this last one, Powell versus Alabama. Let me start off. This 1930s Alabama. In this case, involves some black guys. You think they got a fair shake in Alabama in the 30s? No, not at all. So what happened here?
7 young African American men hopped on a freight train they were going to Birmingham, or like they were leaving Birmingham to go to Alabama.
Okay, seven
Seven
black guys.
And then in the same cart, there was also 7 white guys that got on, and then 2 women.
So how many criminals do we have here?
7.
No. 16. What are they all guilty of?
Getting on the train.
Hopping a train. They're hobos, whatever. They're hopping a train without paying for it. So that's 16 criminals. I think some of them are not going to be charged with anything. I don't want to give it away, but I think there's 9 of them that will not be charged with a thing. That's what I'm thinking. All right, let's go ahead.
All of a sudden there was a fight that broke out because they were all in the same cart.
So you're telling me, in the 30s, there were black guys and white guys together, and they didn't get along? Huh. All right, I'm glad I'm sitting down.
It didn't say how much.
Right.
I'm guessing all of them. I'm not sure. It said the white men were thrown off, and they got up and went and told the nearest town to the sheriff. The sheriff got a bunch of citizens to mob, and they stopped the train and took them to the nearest court as fast as possible without letting them
So there's no cell phones yet. These white people were able to gather together a large group of people to help round up. That's amazing. That you could get, that's sarcasm. They could call the town ahead, and they just quickly, people came running from all over. All right, but they took them to.
They took him into custody, but right as soon as they were taken, the women said, "Wow, the men were going, that they were sexually assaulted 6 times
Okay.
also.
Okay, here's math. Everybody got that? 7, they arrested 7 people for 6 crimes. Alright? 7 people, 6 crimes. Go ahead.
Once that happened, they took him into court. None of them got to call their relatives. They didn't give them anything. They just went straight into the courtroom. It was an all-white judge, like a judge and an all-white jury, and they found them guilty.
How many of them guilty?
All 7.
7. Guilty of 6.
Because they said the women had said those are the exact ones they gave them. They came in there and did that. Well, then they sentenced them to 10 years of life or death, and they ended up being death sentence.
So 7 people got the death penalty for 6 crimes. Does anybody see possibly an issue? They weren't given a lawyer. Did somebody at the end step up and say we represent you?
There was they said in the courtroom, just a guy out in the crowd, he just volunteered and said, I'll represent him.
Was he a lawyer? Who knows?
No, we don't know. It's
Huh.
just random.
Some guy.
Yeah.
Alright. Train Cox. Train Cox stood up to represent. He has some experience in law, so.
And,
That'd be the last.
So then
You won't represent me.
it went to the Supreme Court,
Yes.
and the argument with Powell, they said that, without a defense attorney, it was just that the court was just
Yes.
nothing without it. And then Alabama said that their constitution says they don't need to pay for someone's defense attorney or anything like that. Well, the Supreme Court had a 7-2 majority overturning the convictions and having them retried for all their.
Did they try them different? There was a big difference in the way they tried them. They tried all 7 at the same time. I think they came back later and tried each person individually, that's important. I don't believe any of them got the death penalty. I'm pretty sure they were found guilty. I don't know that. I'm trying to look that up. They were not given the death penalty after that. All right, I'm gonna share this one with you. Last one we'll do here. This is Engel versus Vitale from 1962. In the 50s, New York had a 22-word non-denominational prayer that all school children, public school children, recited at the start of the morning in New York. It said, Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. The Regents believed the prayer could be a useful tool for development of character and good citizenship among the students of the state of New York. The prayer was offered to the school board of the state for their use, and participation in the prayer exercise was voluntary. So the schools didn't have to do it, but some schools chose to. In New Hyde Park, New York, the Union Free School District number 9 directed the local principal to have the prayer said aloud by each class in the presence of a teacher at the beginning of each school day. Parents of 10 pupils, it's a funny word, at the New Hyde Park schools objected to the prayer. They filed suit in New York State Court, seeking a ban on the prayer, insisting that the use of this official prayer in the public schools was contrary to their own children's beliefs, religions, and religious practices. The court upheld the use of the prayer so long as the schools did not compel any pupil to join in the prayer over his or her parents' objections, so the kid could go outside. What do y'all think? I'd join the lawsuit. I'd join the lawsuit. I don't have a problem with prayer. I don't have a problem with God. What if now even if we went to a school, what if we went to a school that was mostly Buddhist? And they said a Buddhist prayer. Not a Buddhist school, but a school that was all Buddhist. You know, I wouldn't get bent out of shape. I want my kids to see, I want them to have real stuff, you know? I don't want them to believe God because I said it. I don't want to believe God because He's real. But also, I don't believe it's the school's job to teach my kids how to pray. They came up with a 6-1 majority. They said, there can, of course, be no doubts that New York's program of daily school invocation of God's blessings is a religious activity. We think by using its public school system to encourage recitation of the Regents Prayer, State of New York has adopted a practice wholly inconsistent with the Establishment Clause. That's the government establishing a religion. Because they say, we acknowledge our dependence upon thee. Well, guess what? Not everybody has dependence upon thee. And I hate the word thee and thy. That doesn't make sense to me. But, so they said, no, you can't force a kid to pray. Do we have school prayer? Yeah, we do. Every day we do. It's perfect. What's perfect about the way Texas does it?
You can say whatever you want then.
You don't have to do it, or you can do it. And you can't be offended by non-action. Am I offending anybody right now? I'm praying right now. I ain't praying, you can't stop me. It's, if you want to pray, you can pray. If you don't want to pray, you don't have to. And you're not being bothered by me praying. I'm just sitting there. You know what I mean? So, anyway. So what, did you learn anything today? What'd you learn today? What'd you pick up today? About how the Supreme Court does stuff. They're only looking at, they're looking at small pictures. They're not looking at the crime and the big pictures. They're not worried about that. They're worried about this. Yes, sir.
So you said that they have cases sent to them, right?
Yes.
So if like this case, if they wouldn't have picked this one up, they would have been sentenced to death.
Yes.
If they didn't pick it up in time.
Yes. If they don't look at it, then it doesn't get changed. And even, it doesn't always get changed if they look at it. It doesn't always get changed. They're like, all right, like a ref in a football game. The ref doesn't care about the touchdown or not. They care about the holding right here. So you had to redo the play without the holding. You know, does that kind of make sense? That's what the Supreme Court. They're not worried about who scored the touchdown or who made the tackle. They're worried about this little penalty they have. Y'all just leave that stuff there. Make sure your name's on the paper and I'll grab it. Okay. What's up? Is that semi-interesting? Semi? Hey, just leave it. Leave everything and I'll pick it up. Have a good day. Go ahead. If I was hired, I'd hire you, Brett.
Cole Horton, please come to the office.
Time to start this paper. I'm just gonna. I don't get. She doesn't read that. I know she doesn't. Well, I got one nothing on my thesis and outline. I did it in like 5 minutes. I don't know. Yeah. I don't even know why she's allowed to teach this class if she's an English teacher. Which honestly, I haven't learned anything. I don't know anything about the government.